UNC directs immediate payment of balance of Paris Club refund, urges states to settle outstanding salaries of workers before Christmas.
Vice President receives World Bank delegation, says government not planning to increase electricity tariff.
Community Court of Justice declares removal of Sierra Leonean Vice President as unconstitutional. Now, according to former President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and I quote, "Our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. The human mind is our fundamental resource," unquote. This aptly shows the importance of education in the development of a nation, especially basic education.
That's right, Rhoda. Now, the world over, primary education is regarded as the most important level. And this is because it is a foundation upon which subsequent educational attainments can be built.
Well, it is in recognition of this that Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights makes basic education universal, free, and compulsory.
And of course, that declaration was in 1948, and in Nigeria, various governments, beginning of course with the regional governments, have placed a premium on the basic education for all citizens by making it a centerpiece of the educational policies. And we saw that in 1955 when the Western region, of course, introduced free education.
Absolutely, you're right, Kingsley. And in 1976, the then military government introduced the Universal Primary Education, that's the UPE, and it was later replaced with the Universal Basic Education, UBE, in 1999. The policies are to, amongst others, ensure education for all.
Now, this development, as the strive towards education for all, has brought about an increase in primary school enrollment in recent years, but net attendance is reported to be only about 70%.
However, recent statistics shows that Nigeria accounts for 50% of the world's out-of-school children.
Now, the UNESCO review of educational standing indicates that although Nigeria has made progress in basic education, much more remains to be done, both in terms of quality and enrollment rate.
And just at a recent ministerial retreat on education, President Muhammadu Buhari said, and I quote, "We cannot afford to continue lagging behind. Education is our launchpad to a more successful, more productive, and a more prosperous future. This administration is committed to revitalizing our education system and making it more responsive and globally competitive," unquote.
So, what should Nigeria do going forward to ensure that the country's basic education is revitalized? What budgetary provisions does the country need to acquire, as it were, the necessary infrastructure and instructional facilities for teaching and learning at the foundation level? And what kind of teacher-pupil ratio is desirable for learning? And what collaboration is also needed amongst the three tiers of government to achieve the objectives of the universal basic education? Now, these are some of the issues our panel of discussants will seek to provide answers to in our discussion segment. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and I welcome you to today's edition. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Rhoda Anona. I'm welcoming you to the program. We're reaching you live from Nigeria's capital city, Abuja, on Africa's largest television network, the NTA. And of course, in the course of the program, our regular companion segments, which is our newspaper review, business news, we have sports, we have foreign and entertainment news. But as always, the news comes first. And Joy Osiago is here with us this morning. Joy, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda and Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to the news.
The presidency has directed the immediate payment of the balance of the Paris Club refund to the states to enable them settle outstanding salaries to workers before Christmas. The president gave the directive at an interactive meeting with members of the Nigerian Governors Forum.
The issue of workers took the center stage because Mr. President is very much concerned about those who depend on their salary to feed their families and pay their house rent. And we had the assurance of governors that we're going to meet up those. And with the Paris Club coming, that every state must ensure that workers get their salary to enable them enjoy the Christmas.
The federal government says the Nigerian worker, as a vital element in national growth and development, must be encouraged to live above the basic social protection floor by his or her employee, no matter the circumstances. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while inaugurating the Tripartite Committee on the National Minimum Wage as part of his administration's commitment towards ensuring fairness and decency in the living standards of the nation's workforce.
Therefore, urge you to amicably consider the issue of a national minimum wage and all matters that are ancillary to it with thoroughness and concern, not only for the welfare of our workforce, but the effect of the country's economy. Accordingly, we should aim to go above the basic social protection flow for all Nigerian workers based on the ability of each tier of government to pay.
Vice President Gini Osinbajo says the Buhari administration is not ready to increase electricity tariff for now, as efforts are being made to clean up the system and create a clear pathway to achieving its power sector reform objectives. The Vice President said this when he met with a World Bank delegation and officials of the International Finance Corporation.
Have discussed and we have agreements on generation, on distribution, on transmission, on governance, and I think this is once again a step forward in our work that we hope to complete relatively soon, I would say.
If we can solve one side of the value chain, which is generation, if we can solve transmission, which is able to wield the power, clearly the partnership and the skill set that solves 2 out of 3 problems must be dependable enough to solve the last mile, and that I say that we will do.
The agricultural sector has continued to receive tremendous interest from the federal government with much hope to diversify the economy. This was also the case at the 6th Presidential Quarterly Business Forum held in Abuja, which aimed at resolving some identified challenges such as funding and loans to smallholder farmers.
The President has directed that we set up a small committee to look at intervention funds in agriculture. It's clear that we are not going to be able to bring down interest rates overnight. There's no question that that's not just going to happen by any kind of fiat. So the way out, of course, is by some kind of intervention arrangements, and that's really what the President has asked that we do.
The ECOWAS Community Court of Justice has declared the removal of Sierra Leonean Vice President Samuel Sumana as unconstitutional. The court also ordered the government to pay all outstanding entitlements of the Vice President from the day of his removal in 2015 to date.
It's about the integrity of the Sierra Leonean state and the rule of law, which says that a president cannot get up one fine morning and just dismiss his vice president. So for us, that was the most important reason why our client came to the ECOWAS court. And that reason has been fulfilled.
In spite of the demands of medical doctors in Nigeria, the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria was only able to register 200 out of 700 foreign trained medical doctors. For this irregularity, the Senate has resolved to invite the acting registrar of the council, Dr. Tajuddin Sanusi, to clarify this anomaly as well as answer questions on various petitions against him, bordering on alleged impropriety.
We in the Senate decided to take these petitions very seriously because we need doctors in our hospitals at this time.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed says the media is right to criticize the present administration but should not engage in mockery of its achievements. The minister said this while declaring open the 68th General Assembly of the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria in Abuja.
In recent times, it is not unusual to read such headlines as Buhari's government losing anti-corruption war. Buhari's anti-corruption war is failing. Ariwa youths knock President Buhari over failing anti-corruption war. This is sheer mockery, not reporting. And this war is not Buhari's war. It is our war.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Rhoda after this break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Everybody comes to the city to seek greener pasture. No, not everybody. Many people also run away from their home villages in search of refuge and peace in the city. These people are running away from archaic customs and traditions, draconian village practices that have in one way or the other made them victims of circumstances based on cultural practices.
It sounds like a tale out of the medieval era.
Oh yes. Keep a date with us this week on Professor John Boone. This episode titled Running to the City, and discover how Warm and Nje escaped to become part and parcel of Professor John Boone's household and proximate people. Also, find out why Jumoke will love Jeroboam instead of Flashball.
Oh, my baby shawarma with a dash and a style. Move like a flash, baby.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow,
the largest data network. Glow Unlimited.
Kehinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taye suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
Your perfect family is under threat by germs. Infectious diseases are now the world's biggest killer of adults and children. Every day, 16,000 children under the ages of 5 and thousands of adults die from infectious diseases. These infectious diseases are caused by germs. They are everywhere. An average human being comes in contact with over 1 million germs daily. In unclean water, dirty surfaces, in the toilet, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes. Germs can cause deadly diseases like typhoid, diarrhea, flu, and cough. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1-Cap Full for surface cleaning in your bathing water, in your laundry water, for first aid, to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol Sure. Endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
Still good morning, Nigeria. Now let's bring you up to date in the world of business as the Central Bank of Nigeria continues to service the retail secondary market intervention sales. Plus, federal government proposes to generate additional 1 trillion naira non-oil revenue in 2018. Details of these and more with our business news correspondent, Kolo Muhammad.
Good morning and thank you for joining us on Business News. The Retail Secondary Market Intervention Sales (SMRS) continues to receive intervention from the Central Bank of Nigeria in continuation of its resolve to guarantee liquidity in the foreign exchange market. Data received from the Central Bank of Nigeria reveals that the current figure was in favor of the agricultural, airlines, petroleum products, raw materials, and machinery sectors. The bank's acting director, Corporate Communications Department, Mr. Isaac Okorafor, confirmed the figures, noting that the releases were targeted at sustaining liquidity in the market as well as boosting production and trade. He reiterated that the bank remained committed to ensuring liquidity in the sector of the market and will continue to intervene in order to drive growth in the economy and guarantee stability in the market. And in its bid to consolidate on non-oil revenues to reduce the deficit on loans in the 2018 budget, the federal government has proposed to generate additional 1 trillion non-oil revenue. These will include an additional 60 billion from duties on cigarettes and alcohol and 2.5 billion from special taxes on luxury cars. The details were contained in the briefing note on the revised 2018 to 2020 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper presented to the National Assembly. The week opened in the green on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Let's now see how trading went down on Monday. And that's Business News. Many thanks for your time.
Kolo Mohammed, thank you very much there for the business package. Next for us, we'll go to the front pages of some of today's newspapers to check out the headlines.
Our regular newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyibi, is in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda. How are you today? Good to see you.
I'm cold.
Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Bayo, good to see you for the review segment. Let's begin with Rhoda. We have stories that are come onto the front pages of some of the papers, but of course it looks like a potpourri of stories. Yes,
really, indeed. But the one that is, of course, common among some of the papers, the first one is the leadership, and that's the story there by the president, directed by the president yesterday, and its leadership captions its lead story this way. President Muhammadu Buhari directs governors to pay all salary arrears before Christmas. President Muhammadu Buhari directs governors to pay all salary arrears before Christmas, and Order Riders approves payment of outstanding Paris Club refund, inaugurates minimum wage committee, says financial strength the federal government, states local governments will determine new salary structure. That's the lead story with the headlines there. Now let's move over to the Nigerian pilot. On the Nigerian pilot, the name plates, it's just below the name plates, and that's the lead story. It says Buhari to governors, pay workers' salary before Christmas, orders payment of outstanding London Paris Club refund to states. That's a story that's on page 6 of the Nigerian pilot. It's also on the page 6 of the leadership.
That's the story you just read now. That's with regard to the presidential directive on the payment of salary arrears. Is the lead for the Punch newspaper. Is a lead for the Punch newspaper. There you have it also by way of photographs on the front page of New Telegraph, and it's the second lead on the front page of this. But let's look at the Punch newspaper now. It's a double-decker headline: clear salary arrears before Christmas. Buhari tells governors and orders payment of fresh Paris Club refund to states, and only wicked governors will shun Buhari's plea. That's according to the NLC. Details of the story can be found on page 7. And as I said, that story is also there on the front page of this day newspaper. It's the second link just beside the photograph showing the president and the governor of Lagos at the meeting that the governors had with the president yesterday. Clear workers' salaries before Christmas. Buhari challenges governors. And as I indicated, you have it as the photograph, 2 photographs there for New Telegraph, 2 composite photographs for New Telegraph. You have it, caption and a cut line: Christmas, President orders governors to clear workers' salaries. And you see some of the governors all smiles there with the president, and of course, says, Bayo, let's take the story before we go to other headlines.
Yes, it's a good day for the worker from all perspectives, but there seems to be a different perspective. The president met with the governors under the umbrella of Governors Forum. These governors were demanding the balance of the payment of the 50% of what is known as Paris reform. And the president has actually directed that the governor of Central Bank, the Minister of Finance and Minister of Budget and Planning, the 3 of them should meet with representatives of the Governors Forum to work out the modalities for the payment of the balance of the 50%. The governors were demanding it as an impetus for their 2018 budget, for budget inclusion. But however, President Muhammadu Buhari emphasized that there is a need for people, for workers, to have their salaries so that they can have a blessed unitide, pay their rent and also pay school fees. Those are the critical perspective. But it also came on a day when the president was inaugurating the minimum wage committee chaired by Ama People. And the indication that came from there is that government was to ensure that there is a fair and decent living wage. However, it has to be a balancing act so that you can ensure that not only is there a minimum living wage, but it's a wage too that the economy can take and the state government can pay. And if you look at it this time around, because it is a tripartite thing, you have government representation, the private sector, and labor. So when it comes out as a minimum wage, it will cut across board, yes, including the public service and the private sector. However, there is a possibility that the committee may now have to look at the implication of a top-down approach, in the sense that if you do a percentage increase across, what people cry about anytime there's a wage increase, inflation, will be dominant, in the sense that those who are at the hierarchy of level 17 and above, for level 14 and above, will tend to earn more than those who are the lower rank of the salary scale. Everybody knows that 18 naira is not enough for anybody to survive. 18,000. The 56,000 that NLC is proposing already is being taken with a pinch of salt because of the challenges in the economy?
Well, now we have taken two issues. One has to do with the presidential directive to state governors to pay worker salaries. Well, if it's an advice, in a sense, it's an advice, but it also tells you the level to which governance has degenerated at the state levels, that the contract between government and workers will appear not to be honored from time to time, which is why you are now requiring the president to direct governors or advise governors to pay salaries. But in terms of what you just said with regard to the minimum wage, that has always been the devil in the detail. You say minimum wage and you find that it goes right up from where there's no more level 1, from level 2 up to level 17. It's a minimum wage, that's the shop floor, that's the minimum that you should pay. But each time there's been an increase by way of minimum wage uptake, you find that every other level, has an increment, and that is where you normally have the busts of the budget. All right, so let's take a look at other headlines. What we just discussed now with regard to minimum wage, above the nameplate of this day newspaper, says financial clout of states should determine next minimum wage, says President. The text of that story can be found on page 39. Now, this headline, below the nameplate of this day newspaper, says, prepare for higher electricity tariffs. Osinbajo tells Nigerians. That's on page 41. Now, a story related to that in terms of the energy sector is this. It says, of course, that has to do with the budget. That's for the New Telegraph. And it's a late story with a double-decker headline. Federal government will sell power plants and houses to fund budget. National Arts Theatre, TBS, that stands for Tafawa Balewa Square in Lagos, and national parks to go. NNPC justifies 2.3 million barrels per day for 2018 budget. That story is there. Then for the Punch newspaper, of course, there are other headlines relating to the economy.
But that's also a story, the story that is also trending on the leadership, and it's also on the Nigerian parliament. But let's begin with the leadership. Just beside the picture story, it says 2018 budget. Federal government to sell power plants, Tafawa Balewa Square and others. It's also trending at the feet of the paper on the Nigerian pilot. It says federal government to sell power plants and Tafawa Balewa Square.
Yes, this was disclosed to the House of a joint committee of both the Senate and the House by the Director General of Budget Office, Ben Akabueze. He specifically indicated that Tafawa Balewa Square, you remember, that was where Nigeria's independence was celebrated. It used to be called Race Course until it was named Tafawa Balewa Square. The National Arts Theatre, that Bulgarian design that hosted the World Black African Festival of Arts, Festac 1977, and also some of the what they describe as integrated power projects are to be put on sale. Why? This is because government requires resources to be able to finance what has been described as a 2018-2020 mid-term expenditure framework and financial fiscal strategy paper. This was the discussion that, you will recall that last week the Senate had to defer its discussion on budget 2018 because they didn't want to put the cart before the horse. The Senate needed, and the House of Reps needed to discuss the MTEF and the FSP as a prelude to considering the 2018 budget. So these are the challenges that are coming from the paucity of funds. And the Director of Budget was specific, and he says categorically that when we don't have enough resources, we need now to have to sell some of these assets to fund the budget.
Well, that was an issue that came up sometime in the past, and there were all kinds of divergent views as to what the nation should do, whether it should continue to put its national patrimony on the block to fund budgets or recurrent expenditure, as it were, which continues to take a major slice of our budget. Very quickly, the Punch newspaper, the number of headlines we'll take from there. Above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, banks' bad loans rise by 50% to 2.4 trillion naira. And this is a story that we discussed on Friday in our conversation segment relating to intimate partner violence. Husband killer bags 7 years for manslaughter. Husband killer bags 7 years for manslaughter. Details of the story can be found on pages 4 and 5. And then at the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper, there's also a story on that. It says Lagos banker allegedly touches wife to death. Then, of course, prison service sacks 8 officers for smuggling drugs into jails. Above that, there's a funny headline here, but well, funny, not necessarily in terms of the significance, but the way it is couched by the president himself. Atiku's exit. Accept my sympathy. Buhari tells Odigi Oyego, who is chairman of APC.
Just a comment there. You recall that the central bank pointed out that those heavy loans that are owned at the banks, they are mostly by some directors of the bank. That was the critical point that the central bank emphasized the other day.
All right, thank you very much, Bayo, and that does it for us on Newspaper Review segment. Thank you very much for coming. See you again tomorrow morning. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, our focus for discussion this morning is on the state of basic education in Nigeria. We'll be back in just a moment.
The Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture, the Made in Nigeria campaign. In the midst of unprecedented multiple challenges, our great country Nigeria, as Africa's largest economy, is surely marching on to a new era of all-round prosperity, especially through re-engineered and diversified economy, powerfully driven by the change agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR.
We will patronize local entrepreneurs. We will promote the manufacturing powerhouses. Our objective is to make Nigeria a new manufacturing hub.
It is not time to complain. It is time to join the campaign. It is time for economic recovery, growth and diversification of our economy by Made in Nigeria.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
These patriots worked together to achieve independence for one united Nigeria. Although some may say Nigeria is a mistake, we all know that the Almighty never makes mistakes.
God has not made a mistake by bringing us all together in the way that He has brought us together. God has put us together here so that we can build a community that will be an example to the entire world.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And of course, there's been some hue and cry, as it were, over the state and quality of basic education in Nigeria. Let's join our correspondent, Ngozi Chude, for this background report. As a prompt for our discussion, that's the first part, of course, we'll be taking a look at issues pertaining to the educational system in the country, beginning, of course, today with the state of basic education.
You are my teacher, so teach me how to pronounce this.
Judiciary as division, holding as Jelicity.
What is judiciary?
Dictation of age. Dictation of age.
Say the what?
Dictation of age. Declaration of age.
This encounter in August 2013 was one many termed as unfortunate and embarrassing. Apparently, it went viral owing to the fact that the supposed teacher was in the primary education system in Edo State for the past 20 years and couldn't read her own age declaration certificate. Similarly, the Minister of Mines and Steel, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, experienced something close to this during his term as Ekiti State Governor when he insisted on carrying out an assessment exercise as part of efforts to improve the state education system. Fast forward to 2017, the running story from Kaduna State in the last few weeks compounds the issue. The alarming situation saw over 21,000 teachers out of 33,000 failing a primary 4 competency test, resulting in the state government resolving to sack them. Unfortunately, this is not peculiar to the states, as it is generally a problem in the education system in Nigeria, among other issues, a situation indicative of the poor state of education across the country. For some experts, the teachers falling short of the expected standard is stemmed from this precarious situation that has plagued the system for years, no thanks to substandard basic education. As basic it is supposed to be, it is therefore surprising that Nigeria has fallen short of expectation in this area. This perhaps informed the launch of the federal government's universal basic education policy in 1999 to give every Nigerian child access to education, especially from 6 to 11 years. The program was targeted at providing free primary and junior secondary for all. But the recurring issue of poor funding, lack of infrastructure, and corruption has led to the poor implementation of this policy, which hampers the realization of the objectives of the policy, which is to provide free, compulsory, and basic education. As of 2015, Nigeria ranked 103 out of 118 countries in the UNESCO's Education for All EFA Development Index, which takes into account universal primary education, adult literacy, quality of education, and gender parity. In its latest review of Nigeria's educational standing in 2015, UNESCO has concluded that although progress has been made in basic education, much more remains to be done, both in quantity and quality. Worried by this, the federal government established an intervention fund to all 32 states of the Federation as part of measures to standardize primary education. However, 17 states have failed to access the 16.2 billion naira intervention fund, a situation threatening the future of millions of children across the country. In an effort to arrest the poor standard, especially at this basic level in Nigeria, the Universal Basic Education Commission commenced an assessment of both pupils and students in junior secondary school across the country. This assessment, according to UBEC, is to uplift education standards, especially at the basic school level. Meanwhile, Nigeria's education sector was allocated only 7.4% of the 8.6 trillion naira in the 2018 budget, much lower than the 26% of the national budget recommended by the United Nations. The road to redemption is on, but for many, the future is still bleak, and there are questions begging for answers. On Good Morning Nigeria today, we take a look at how devastating basic education in Nigeria has been, addressing the challenges and the way forward.
Thank you very much, Ngozi Chude, for that background report. Now we have three guests with us here in the Abuja studios, as well as from Benin Network Center. First, we'd like to welcome at this time the Executive Secretary of Universal Basic Education Commission, that's UBEC, Dr. Hamid Boboye. Dr. Boboye, pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you.
Also here with us in the studios is the chairman of the Borno State Universal Basic Education Board. That's the Borno SUBEB. SUBEB is the acronym for the State Universal Basic Education Board. Dr. Shetima Kulima. Dr. Kulima, pleasure to have you with us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
And we're also being joined here in the studio by Dr. Sani Ahmed Sufi. He is a consultant on education and e-learning. He was a former acting permanent secretary, Federal Ministry of Education, also a former education commissioner for Kano State, also a former university lecturer at Bayero University. Dr. Sufi, it's good to have you join us.
Well.
All right, we're being joined from our Benin Network Center by Dr. Juan Osa of Yahweh. She is the administrator, State Universal Basic Education, Edo State, the sole administrator of State Universal Basic Education Board, Edo State. That's Dr. Juan. Thank you very much for joining us, and good morning, Nigeria. Good morning.
All right, so let's begin the conversation straight away with the headsman at UBEC, which is Universal Basic Education Commission. UBEC, Dr. Boboy, UBEC has been running for some years now, but still, what is the state of basic education in Nigeria?
Well, the state of basic education, thank you very much for the question. The state of basic education in Nigeria, put simply, is to say that it's in dire straits. It is, it's a vast system under different tiers of government that is, as we have it today. You have, primary education, which technically is under local governments, the local government education authorities. You have the suburbs that are there that work with the LGEAs. Tend to coordinate, isn't it? And at the end of the day, you have UBEC as an agency, which also links up, isn't it, with the entire structure, to see how does it make a difference. UBEC serves both as an intervention agency in terms of providing, and that had already been mentioned, in terms of providing some level of funding that could help the system move. And I think looking at the entire system, challenges that had been left for so long that have not been addressed. You have, we talk about the issue of teachers and the quality of teachers, because this has been in the news, and it's something that for a long time, those people who had been in the system and who had been managing this system had been saying that we have a huge number of unqualified teachers that have been teaching. The recruitment, of course, is a little bit more complex. And as we have always said, UBEC being an intervention agency, it doesn't recruit teachers, it doesn't pay salaries of teachers. But we have a real problem in that particular area. We have serious challenges in the area of infrastructure. It's such a vast system that for a long time also, suffered a lot of neglect, And you come to find that anybody saddled with a responsibility at the state level, at the federal level, struggles, with that particular responsibility of providing the requisite infrastructure, the right learning environment that can, help deliver quality basic education in the country. Of course, there's also the issue of funding. And funding is very key in that regard. And from the background report, we have heard, of the declining, financial fortunes that, of the sector. We have also seen perhaps also other problems where the funds are available. UBEC gets 2% of the consolidated revenue fund that it, distributes to states. The counterpart funding had always been the problem, isn't it, where again, isn't it, because of, our own economic, isn't it, the economic climate and the economic situation, it becomes a little bit difficult for a lot of the states to access this money. But I think there's also that political will that had to be factored into the whole equation. People having, you have 1 billion, isn't it, minimum per year, isn't it, but you need to produce another 1 billion to come and have it. A lot of the states, and I want to report, because sometimes we have exaggerated, isn't it, news about the funding issue, in terms of UBEC funding, UBEC funds lying without being accessed. The entire Northeast, and even Adamawa State that was lagging behind, isn't it, also had undertaken to pay its own counterpart funding before the end of the year. the entire Northwest had accessed these funds. Almost all the states in the South, you know, Edo and Bayelsa, but they have also, isn't it, you know, made that undertaking. Edo had been trying to reorganize the system, isn't it, you know, and that's why you have a sole administrator in Suburb now who is at your Benin Studios. Also, isn't, you know, making effort. Of course, recently, Ongo, which had been lagging behind, isn't, you know, came and, you know, brought about 3.9 billion to collect another 3.9 billion, having getting to about 7.something billion in his basic education kitty. We're making progress on that, isn't it, you know, and the reason why sometimes people don't understand the structure of the fund is that by the end, usually these are monthly releases that come. States, 2017 is not usually accessed until 2018 because people do not want to pay their counterpart funding and keep on getting these monies in bits and pieces.
All right, Dr. Bobere, the good points that you have raised there, we'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. You have indicated, I mean, straight away that basic education is in dire straits, and you listed the various challenges that are there. Let's bring in now the chairman of Suburb Barono, that's Dr. Kulima. Dr. Kulima, what is your state experience like with regard to basic education? Other than the fact, which is very well known, that the state has been heavily impacted, being the epicenter of Boko Haram terrorism.
Yes, Borno experienced a very disastrous campaign of the Boko Haram, and as a result of that particular belligerence act of the Boko Haram, the basic education sector enormously suffered. Even that apart, what actually raised by the Executive Secretary of UBEC is apparently exists in Borno, that issue of the quality of teachers, the issue of decaying infrastructure. Funding per se in our own state is not a problem because Borno is having up-to-date accession of the counterpart funds even in the face of the crisis we face. So apart from the Boko Haram insurgency that afflicted and inflicted serious problem on the education system in the state, the quality of teachers is certainly a sorry stage. In a situation where we can get dozens of teachers where they specialize basically in social studies and religious studies, only about 2 to 3% you can get qualified teaching in English and mathematics. One pathetic aspect you can see in most of our schools, you can see that English is handled by a teacher who is teaching social studies, who specializes in social studies. Mathematics usually being taken by teachers of religious studies. So you can see a lot of messy situation in the system. We come to wonder where actually the problem lies. Is it with the school system itself, or just a manifestation of the general decay of education in Nigeria that actually manifested itself in the kind of situation we found in Borno today? Then you can also understand that the government of Borno State is doing marvelously well, apart from the assertion that we have been making in our own matching grants which we are getting from UBEC. The Borno State government is practically committing a lot of efforts in providing conducive learning environments in our states, particularly for now because of the mass influx of people to the metropolis as a result of areas that hitherto become theaters of conflict. You can see the school system within the metropolis are adequately overstretched. And for this, the state government now providing new learning spaces by constructing a lot of mega schools. For now, we are having 20 mega schools established across the state. You can also have that in these mega schools, we have not fewer than 24 classrooms. And we are now embarking on 60 classrooms, mega schools, in the next, in the 2017 session. Now, you can see also that the state government, we have a lot of orphanage caused actually by the crisis that we found in the state. We have authentic evidence of 442 orphans registered, and if something has not been done for this, there would be a time bomb for the state.
All right, Dr. Kilimas, I have to cut you there. I would come to the issue of infrastructure, but then let's look at the main issues here. Some of the main issues, of course, the infrastructure is one of them, but then the issue of funding, the issue of quality of teachers, the whole system. Let's go to Dr. Joan in Benin. Dr. Joan, what's your experience like in Edo State?
Thank you. In Edo State, we're actually following His Excellency Governor Godwin Obaseki's strong commitment to revamping basic education in Edo State. He actually uses the term reenactment because we are not trying to come in and dismantle and completely disrupt everything that's on ground. But rather, the vision is that we want to go back and look at what worked in the past. For example, the focus on extracurricular activities like sports, debates, quiz competition, a very vibrant inspectorate at the time that ensured that the quality of education, that there was constant quality assurance, monitoring, and professional development for teachers. So in Edo State, we started by restructuring our SUBEB, the State Universal Basic Education Board, and we've finished that recruitment process that was really focused on, that was very merit-driven, rigorous and merit-driven.
Dr. John, sorry, I'd like to take you back to my question. And the question is, as we speak right now, what is the state of universal basic education in Edo State?
The state of universal basic education in Edo State, there are, strong points. There are areas that require improvement and some work, particularly in terms of data, having accurate data that will drive decision making. So in that regard, we're currently in the process of completing a statewide enumeration exercise that will allow us to know the number of pupils we have in our schools, the number of teachers, the number of schools, and then also look at, in terms of the needs, professional development needs of teachers, as well as our education managers. So all of this combined, we're really looking at infusing quality into our basic education system in Edo State.
What are the challenges that you are having right now? What are the challenges that you're having right now in Edo State?
There's an array of challenges. In addition to having accurate data, we also have to deal with the issue of vandalism. Some of the schools that were renovated by the immediate past administration, some of them we are experiencing vandalism, we are experiencing encroachment by community members. And so to address some of these issues, we are working to strengthen our school-based management committees, our Parents-Teachers Association, as well as our Mothers Committee. We want the community to have a stronger sense of ownership, to understand that we are looking for, to develop a symbiotic relationship between government and the community to help improve, to help ensure that we are creating a conducive learning environment for our children.
All right, Dr. Joan of Yahweh, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in now Dr. Sophie Eto this year. Dr. Sophie, you were, of course, in the Federal Ministry of Education, where at some point you were acting permanent secretary. You also have taught at Bayer University as a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Education. Now, some of the challenges facing basic education in the country probably are also universal, countrywide, and the sense that we know what the issues are, whether in terms of teacher quality, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of instructional material, in terms of teacher-pupil ratio, and so on and so forth. Why is it that for decades running, we have not been able to break this cycle of challenges. So that we're getting on top of one of the more intractable challenges facing basic education.
Thank you. First of all, I thank you for bringing into fore the issue of basic education, because basic education is the foundation upon which our education system is built. And once you are not able to have a right mix of your foundation and there is a crack, you'll never build something that is going to be strong or something that at least you'll be able to utilize. Basic education in Nigeria can be assessed within a parameter which is usually used in assessing the efficacy of a system. One, we have to look at it within the context of access, within the context of quality, and within the context of equity. When we look at basic education within the context of access, Nigeria has a very fundamental problem. One, the latest World Bank report indicated that we are having more than 13 million children still not covered by basic education infrastructure in Nigeria. In other words, there are over 13 million children roaming streets in Nigeria and are not going to primary schools. And this figure has just increased within the last 2 years, because the last 2 years we are talking about 10 million and they have already increased 13 million. And there is disproportions within this. In certain areas of the country, the enrollment covers up to 85, 90, 100% universal coverage. In others, particularly the Northeast now, maybe aided by the insurgency there, the coverage was even getting below 50%. So this is very fundamental. And basic education also means ability to have basic literacy, numeracy, for which somebody could have functional education to survive in a society. At one point, we were able to, the universal community was able to identify 9 countries with a very high populations and with a high level of illiteracy. Nigeria is one of them. And out of these 9 countries, we call them the E9 countries, who are not able to achieve reasonable basic education for their communities, we assessed them at some point, and out of these 9, only 2 countries were not performing in accordance with the standard set up of them. And these 2 countries were Nigeria and Pakistan. And I don't think there has been anything remarkable that has been done to change this trend. And I think if we go to do the same assessment, we will find that Nigeria has not been doing well in basic education, despite the so much of funds that has been set for this sector. I can understand that is within the access issue. The quality is even more pathetic, because even those that are able to get a coverage of school, a lot of what goes on in the school doesn't guarantee you the basic numeracy and literacy and basic other educational things which are supposed to acquire as you go through the system. That is what is even explaining the frustration of some governors of having to sack thousands of teachers. It's a frustration, you can see. But the reality of it is that so long as we continue in this way, if we do not have a dramatic initiative to change this, the trend will continue. When you're talking about funding, if today you are going to put $1 trillion in basic education, you are going to come with the same result. So long as you have not taken a dramatic look at the system within a systematic way to see how you can turn around this system. The issue of, I'm glad the Executive Secretary of UBEC has said it, that some states are accessing the funds. But the issue is not just accessing the funds. They have just started accessing the funds. These funds have been there for over 10 years. At some point, we have over 20 billion, 30 billion there laying in the banks. People are not even taking the money. And you go there, you go to some of these states, the children, one will be facing right, another one will facing left, and in the same shade, and this is class 2, this is class 1.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Sophie, sorry to interject. You've talked about quality. You've also talked about access as challenges that we continue to confront in the basic education level. But the question I asked, really, I thought you were coming to that shortly. Why is it that we have not been able to overcome these challenges? What have been the obstacles in our solutions to these challenges?
What I'm saying is that there hasn't been really looking at the issue and see what is the problem.
Okay.
Like I said, there are three issues. The access issue. The access issue. Children are not going to school. When somebody just came up and said that, well, the best thing that we can do is that in the north, a lot of people don't go to school because they are almajiris. You came, you created almajiri schools. 15 billion naira was earmarked for this. And I don't know whether you saw the report of either yesterday or the day before yesterday. Daily Trust said that most of these schools are there abandoned, not being used. Some of them are have been converted into conventional schools. And really, all this almajiri issue, which initially the government started, became like a political brouhaha. So you have to look at this thing very systematically and really seriously look at the issues. I'm not saying that the issues will just come out, and you have to have the political will, not just to give money and give money and give money. You have to go through a structural changes in the way you cover those areas that are not covered by education. You have to do a structural way in bringing parents and put legal issues in ensuring that children who are seen roaming streets and not going to school are brought within the fold school, and take either the government, the local government, and the parents responsible for not having universal access. Which I have not said is the equity issue also, because a lot of girls are not going to school, particularly in the northern part of this country. In some of the places, they will start together on an equal basis, but by the time you that way.
All right, Dr. Sophie, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go back to the Executive Secretary of UBEC, Dr. Hamid Baboy. Earlier, of course, you had started, as it were, enumerating some of the challenges that continue to bedevil basic education in the country. What is it that UBEC is funding? What is the purpose of your intervention? Is it merely to release money? You release money, and then we still have all these issues that we talk about, low access, the issue of quality, the issue of infrastructure, and all the other things. What is the mandate of UBEC somewhat askew?
Okay, thank you for this question. UBEC's mandate is a very clear one in terms of, serving as an intervention agency that can make a difference within the basic education sector. And that's why it receives money. There are about 4 or 5 categories, of funds that come to UBEC. Number one, they're the matching grant. The matching grant is 50% of the entire amount that is given to states. And that's the one that requires the counterpart funding. States come. But it's not just you come, bring your counterpart funding, get the money and go. Absolutely not. You first, we confirm your lodgement, of the counterpart fund, in a designated bank that is of your choice. You bring an action plan of exactly what do you want to do with this money. Okay. We look at it, verify, look at the various projects that you are going to have, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, if your entire team will come for defending this action plan, where we look at each and every facet of it, before the decision is made, finally, being satisfied with the action plan, to release the matching grant, that. Then, thirdly, because sometimes people have that misconception that after that, you may go back, and just relaxes, go and do what you want. Absolutely not. We get back, every quarter, we have the financial monitoring exercise, where we have UBEC, auditors, that are there, as well as other financial agencies within the federal government that join us on a quarterly review, looking at the books of UBEC, the chairman of UBEC are part of this process, and they understand what goes on. And it is through that process sometimes that we even discover certain problems. That look here, isn't it, you know, some state governors, not the current ones, isn't it, you know, the previous, you know, ones used to withdraw the counterpart funding. Because usually a lot of them take loans from banks to secure that money, isn't it, you know. And we take the remedial action, either of closing the account, isn't it, you know, and ensuring these monies were brought back to the SUBEB account. And then we have the project monitoring, that we follow these projects, isn't it, and see that they are properly executed, isn't it, you know, within the various states, isn't it, you know, that actually isn't undertake them. And at the end of the day, isn't it, you know, we ensure that at least the monies that are taken, isn't it, you know, from that. The second category of funds are those funds also that go back to the seats. And what are they? The professional teacher development. We ensure that part of that process is that the teachers that are there, isn't it, you know, within the system, working with the SUBEBs, these teachers go through a professional training program using the various training partners, isn't it, you know, that the SUBEBs themselves, isn't it, you know, select. Thereafter, isn't it, you know, UBEC on its own part, isn't it, you know, monitors this particular project and ensures, isn't it, you know. And these teacher professional development in some key areas in terms of literacy and numeracy. You know, the phonics system that is being put in place, the mathematics, isn't it, you know, and science, isn't it, you know, subjects that are also, isn't it, ensuring the teachers, isn't it, you know, understand the pedagogy and other aspects of that. Also, you know, we look at, isn't it, you know, the cluster system where schools are gathered, isn't it, you know, together based on the recommendations and the needs of the state. Because again, UBEC is also accused of trying to impose a lot of things. We have to work with the state, and we work with the state in this particular area. And then we have other funds in the area of special education. You know, that, you know, also, isn't it, 2% of the 2%, you know, goes for special education. And then instructional materials, you know, that are also part of that particular process.
Why, in spite of all of this, we are still having this dismal picture, what you refer to as the dire straits?
You're absolutely right, in the sense that UBEC is only intervening. We have to go back and see how do we develop that kind of synergy within the system that can move us forward. When the teacher thing actually came out, isn't, you know, people ask, okay, UBEC, what have you been doing? We have poor teachers here. And the answer I always give is that, look here, we were not part of the process of recruitment of any teacher. And we have been taking these statistics and telling people we have a problem. So BEPS, states, local government education authorities, we have to sit up on this issue. Why? Because you cannot take a secondary school failure, isn't those who failed at secondary school, and recruit them into the teaching force without training. You cannot take other people into this particular system. But the most important thing that we also have to look at, you know, in the entire process, and I think Dr. Sufi was also raising that particular issue, we need to see how do we develop the political will within the states. When the people at the helm of affairs at various levels are not concerned about this particular issue, or some do not prioritize education, where is it going to get us?
Dr. Abuboye, just recently you began a nationwide assessment of basic education across the country. Why are you doing this, of course, and what do you intend to achieve at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Well, what have you gotten so far?
Yeah. When I came on, I came to UBEC, isn't it? You know, there are certain key things that you find. Number one, the worry about the planning process. And I think everybody who knows the system talks about this issue. And so from about, you know, January, we started talking about these things. And what I want to report is that from that time, isn't it, the whole process where the entire international partners, education partners that we have, the World Bank, DFID, and so on, UNICEF, UNESCO, we got together along with the SUBEBs to ensure that we have a medium-term, you know, strategic sector plan for education. We have gone very far, isn't it? You know, we are now in the concluding stages, isn't it? You know, and you know, it's something that we hope, isn't it? You know, before the end of the year, we are going to have that plan. That is bottom up, not coming, you know, somebody coming to impose this, isn't it? You know, and this is very vital. Because without planning, we are not going to get anywhere as far as this sector is concerned. The second aspect, I think that we also need to look at is the issue of learning assessment a national assessment that will look at learning achievement. If you go to the E9 countries, I was in E9 in Bangladesh, isn't it? You know, he had been going to, you know, Dr. Sophie had been going to that. Nigeria, you know, our own record of this assessment, isn't it? You know, stopped at 2011. From 2011, we have not gone out, isn't it, to see actually are our children learning. And all what we do is take those dramatic steps, isn't it, you know, without something consistent. And that's the purpose of this particular project. We are coming back to say that to reform this system, to get it working, we need to do what is right.
All right, Dr. Baboye, thank you very much. Let's return to our Benin Network studios. Dr. Joan Oviawe, of course, you listen to the UBEC Executive Secretary and then the other guests. What exactly, I mean, from your experience, has been wrong with basic education? Incidentally, it appears, as some commentators have indicated, that when we are discussing a number of these challenges, they would appear to be more preponderant in public schools. We'll come later to discuss whether or not the intervention by private schools, you know, has been of any dramatic help. What exactly has been wrong? Is it that governments do not appear to have a fuller appreciation of human capital development beginning at that basic level and therefore pay lip service to it and do all kinds of things with regard to infrastructural development?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a multiplicity of issues. Certainly the rhetoric about quality education, particularly basic education in Nigeria, is very robust. My opinion, based on experiences so far in the field, is that we need commitment across the board, from top-level policymakers to the lowest level implementers. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking and talking, and nothing is going to move forward. There's a lot of work. From my experience in Edo State so far, there's a lot to be done. If we're talking about infrastructure, we are looking at how best to, what is our infrastructure plan, for example? How can we build more durable and cost-effective schools so that the materials that are used are sustainable, they last a long time, we just don't keep pumping money and not seeing the value. What's the return on investment? So I think the issues are there has to be a way for everyone, all stakeholders, to move from rhetoric to action. And that action is going to take a lot of commitment. Every day something has to be done. And that's why what we have in Edo State now, the political will is there, the leadership is there, the vision is there. And so we're going to work with everybody. And those who are not ready to work within the system, they have to find something else to do. So ultimately, I think having a plan of action and having that roadmap of action that is practicable, that is realistic even, will go a long way to move us from just talk and to action. And then also, the narrative for the last several years and some decades has been this sort of blame game. Everyone is blaming everybody, and there doesn't seem to be a sense of ownership, even at the community level, at the school level. We in Edo State, for example, we are in the process now of even meeting with our union, our state, the state chapter of our union, to say, these are some of the issues that are coming out from our enumeration exercises in terms of concerns that we have in relation to commitment by some of our key stakeholders, like some of our teachers and head teachers and so on and so forth. Going forward, what is the plan of action that we all can contribute to and agree to? So there is definitely a need for a more sort of incisive and intentional dialogue by all stakeholders involved. And if we can continue to do what we're supposed to do, holding people responsible, having a strong accountability system, training our teachers, training our education managers, both teaching and non-teaching staff, and holding our contractors even accountable too. You go around the country, even in our state, we see the quality of work being done, and there has to be, at some level, a sense of righteous indignation to be able to do this work, because our children do not deserve to be where they are now, where they are languishing across the country, languishing in our public education system. And even though resources are limited, but from the little we have, we can do so much. And that's the vision of Governor Obaseki in Edo State, and that's what we are pushing for.
Dr. Joan, I was also going to ask you, is the issue of quality, teachers' quality, something you're also dealing with in Edo State?
Absolutely. As part of the enumeration, ongoing enumeration exercise, we want to know, we are trying to know for a fact the number of teachers that we have. And then once we understand that, we are then following up with an assessment, a skills assessment of our teachers to sort of see where they are, particularly at the primary level. We're also looking at the curriculum, the curriculum of the teacher training curriculum, what can be done to revamp it so that pedagogy and the methods of teaching are in tune with modern day trends. One of the areas that His Excellency Governor Obaseki is looking into very seriously is the development of an innovation lab for both in-service, so that's those who are already teaching in the system, and then those who are in teacher training school, those who are training to become teachers. So we have constant professional development for our teachers. And then not just haphazard professional development for teachers, but what we want to do is to ensure that the recommendations out of our quality assurance visits, both those done by UBEC and those that we do in state, drive the curriculum of our teacher professional development. So that if we are finding out, for example, that some of our teachers are not skilled at improvising, using available materials around them, incorporating them into their instruction, then we, as part of our, then we have a professional development training on that, on classroom management, on different kinds of pedagogy, different kinds of learning style. In all of these also, we are not forgetting our special needs children. And so there's training also for those who are teaching our children with special needs. So it's a very, the approach that we are using is one that is very holistic. Even in our SUBEB, we now have a human resources department that is mandated to really track training. What's the number of teachers we have? Who are those going through training? Because there are all kinds of ways that over the years that the system has been perverted across the country. And teacher training is one of those where people keep, the same set of teachers keep going to training. You understand? And we are not spreading that training opportunity. So in our state, we're trying to systematize everything so that we're strengthening the institutional processes, the governing processes, that every teacher that goes through professional development training is tracked, and we're able to assess at the end of the year, at the end of the term, how they have improved. So measurement and evaluation is key. Continuous monitoring is also very important.
All right, Dr. Oviawe, thank you very much. And we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
Hold it! Me! I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you going to yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me, I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria. Our focus has been on the state of basic education in Nigeria. But before we get back to our guest, I would like to take some of our tweets. That's a reaction coming from our viewers via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. I'll take the first one, and it's from Dele Jackson Solomon. He says, the quality of national school curriculum is undermined by the general quality of teachers. Poor infrastructure, social and cultural barriers, low participation by primary school age, and lack of enforcement by UBE. All these translates into a low level of learning achievement.
We have this tweet from Seidu ML. It says, basic education is one key area we need to get it right. Investment in education pays the best interest. So much of the problem of half-baked university graduates is due to poor basic education. Where the foundation is weak, the structure cannot stand.
Abdul Hamid Ado Daura, he says, from my observation and experience as a teacher, I have come to the conclusion that government alone cannot make any remarkable achievement in the provision of quality primary education without the support of society. Our societies don't value teachers. We need to change.
Sunny IA tweet says, good morning, sir. Our native language is the key to our success in primary education if we truly want this country to compete.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, the basic primary education in Nigeria must be supported with Nigeria's wider, clear and coherent economic, social and educational policies if it must achieve its purpose.
And then we have this one from Dele Jack Solomon. It says, revisiting this topic as a subject of discourse today, actually we discussed the education challenges of education a couple of weeks ago on the program, means that the yearnings for the repositioning of our poor educational system have just begun. That's the repositioning has just begun with at NTA GMN. Now, the importance of robust education for our children cannot be overemphasized. NTA, please continue to do the needful. Nigeria must be great again.
Usman Waziri tweets, I can't imagine a teacher in the background report cannot read. This is appalling. What will she teach the pupil? Then is it her native language or what?
Shakiro tweets, primary education is never structured because those who had our education system never applied global practices in the system. They run our education with personal opinion. Minister go, minister come, our education remains destitute.
And this one is from Abdullahi Adodara. He tweets again. He says, I'd like our guests to answer these questions. Why is it that despite the introduction of new educational policies, technology, and modern teaching learning approaches, yet the quality of present primary education is far below what we used to get about 20 years ago?
Henrietta Alam tweets, funding and infrastructure are not problems. Vision is. They should sincerely ask themselves what they have planned for the Nigerian children. All right, so this is some of the tweets that we have in the meantime. Let's bring in our guest again, Dr. Sani Sophie. Dr. Sophie, when, according to some commentators, when we're discussing the challenges that the Nigerian education system has, particularly with regard at this time, basic level, there's a problem, they say, of overgeneralization. And therefore, they try to segment it into the challenges public schools and the challenges private schools. As we have seen in the past 25 to 30 years, when there was the obvious collapse of the quality of public schools, then you started having a phenomenal growth in the number of private schools. So that these days, artisans and those who are doing menial jobs will prefer to take their children to private schools, even though some of them also have challenges. Is there a sense in which private schools, particularly at the basic level, have tended to fill in the gap in terms of quality, in terms of access, in terms of equity, or those other challenges that we'll talk about that bedevil Nigeria's educational system?
Well, public school system everywhere is a bigger player. It's a bigger player in a sense that over 90% of children that are going through a schooling process go to public schools. But then, and in the past, it is not just a bigger player, but it's the only player. But then as the system begins to expand beyond the ordinary, coupled by the fact that the public school system began to have less quality, and the thing was growing by day, so certainly certain individuals start building private schools where they think they can guarantee some degree of learning. So when private school system began to chip in where public school system is failing, it reached a point that the decay in the public school system becomes so enormous to a point that the greatest percentage of those children that have successfully finished primary school and are going to good secondary school are actually not coming from public schools, but are coming from private schools. The unfortunate situation currently is that you hardly get a child who will go through primary education in a public school, go to secondary, public school, and then go to a university. So a lot of people, even those who are, so long as they have gone through the school system, hardly will they allow their children going to the public school, because even if they do go, they cannot guarantee the basic learning which will put them on the ladder of educational development, going to a good secondary school and going to that. And this is because the public is still, nobody takes responsibility. And this is the main issue. In education, in everywhere, like you get in other sectors, we have to note that the responsibility for primary education is something that is within the control of local governments. Local government are the employees of teachers. Local government are supposed to be the major players in this. The UBEC is just an intervening agency, and the intervention is more or less financial. They're supposed to give some funds because the states and local government cannot just inject sufficient funds to run the school. But the basic responsibility is in the local community, the local governments. And it is the local government that has the parents. And when you do not have universal coverage, people don't go to school. It is not UBEC that you will put the responsibility, and sometimes not even the governor, but the chairman of the local government. And we never hold these people responsible for what goes in the schools. So long as you think that your solution is only bringing money in Nigeria, particularly with also our record of corruption, you will never get your things in a right mix. So we have to begin to say, look, this is a local government area, and we realize that you are not able to enroll enough children in your school, and you are not able to ensure that these children have gone to the school itself. In the past, you will see that a village head goes to school once in a week, at least to see the children. But a local government chairman will take a whole of his 4-year tenure without going to school and see what they are going. Even if he goes, probably he's more interested in seeing whether the contractor is building the work. But he doesn't care to look at what the children are learning in the school.
All right, Dr. Sophie.
Very basic.
Yeah, Dr. Sophie, thank you very much. Let's bring in the chairman of Borno Subeb back again into all of this. The point has been made. What Dr. Sophie just said now is another restatement, if you like, of what Dr. Boboye said in terms of the absence of the political will. What has been the experience? We've discussed the local government system on this program, and there's almost unanimous consensus. There's consensus, rather, to the effect that the local government system it's been a weak link, as it were. It hasn't quite lived up to its billing. Now, basic education is its responsibility, and there is also the allegation that some state governments, take education as a honey pot, so that whenever money comes, that's the first place you go to. And that's why we're having all of this. What do we know from your experience and indeed your interaction with other suburb chairmen or sole administrators countrywide? First, with regard to how the local government system has not quite conduced to basic education, and how political interference has also been a hindrance to the growth of basic education.
Yes, thank you. For the local government chairman, generally, particularly with regards to Borno, we would see that they initially took the whole thing as a job for the boys. This is why teaching has been relegated to the background. In a situation where you can see a local government chairman would come, just try to give teaching appointment to people who are not teachers, to go and then recruit them to be teachers. They are not going to the school, but only come at the end of the month to collect salary. So teaching virtually by the local government system, by nature of their own intellect and the caliber of people who are coming into the system, also relegated teaching as an occupation, teaching as a job, teaching as a business. That issue of professionalism has vanished over the years. And for that reason, you can see that when a system or a professional group which loses its distinctive attributes of professionalism, then that becomes occupation. Over the years, I would attribute most of our own problem of non-professionalization of the teaching profession at the basic education level to the activities of the local government chairman over the years. I know of, particularly in my own state, there are about 6 local governments that cannot pay their own minimum wage for the teachers because of the overbulleted nature of the staff in that particular local government. When you take the records of those, you will see that political party officials, hench boys of the local government chairman, inundated the voucher of that particular UBE, that particular LEA. So you can see that actual teachers with teacher certificate you hardly get in a substantial number. So with this kind, coupled with the fact that politicization of the entire teaching system further rocked the entire system. Now you can also, as regards to the issue of interference, yes, in some states, of course, it is there, but to be sure, in my own state, that issue is not as very prevalent. Particularly, my governor is too enthusiastic about developing the basic education component of the education subsector. For chairmen of local governments, of course, it is a political period, and for that reason, there are certain interference. Unless something has been done to insulate the system from the local government purview, we would continue to have this kind of mess in the basic education system. What we would going to do is that the entire bulk of the responsibility of basic education should be vested under the state government. That is where it would be insulated from politicization and commercialization of the system.
Just before we bring in the UBEC chairman, in terms of politics now, because the explanation, gets to the root of the issues, which you can virtually apply countrywide.
Yes.
You say bring basic education under the purview of state governments. Now, but we have also heard, from various commentators, from local government operatives in the past, that local governments, just like state houses of assembly, are virtually in the pockets of state governors. So if state governors superintend the abuse of the state local government joint accounts, if you have access to the joint account, why can't you also supervise much more effectively what local governments are doing with regard to basic education? What's missing there?
In this regard, people tend to exaggerate the extent of pervasiveness of governors controlling the entire system. You can also go to see that the local government system generally appears to be a problem in the entire state of the country for now, because it is being affected and afflicted by corruption, populousness of the leadership of that particular level and what have you. But still, in certain states, you cannot generalize it that the governors are having an undue influence over the entire system. Some of them are more responsive. Most of the state governors are responsive. They have that political will, and the prioritization is there. The general enthusiasm to uplift the component of basic education is there in some of the states. So still, governors are going, governors are coming. Those who are not a little bit prioritizing the basic education component likely could go. And as time goes, we are going to get people who are much more committed and quite enthusiastic and having that particular zeal in pursuing the course of the basic education and to establish a very formidable educational foundation in the system.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Boboyi. Dr. Boboyi, just not too long ago, Dr. Sophie was also saying here that for some years, some amount of money, funds for UBEC, about 20 billion was lying idle for some years, and some states were not still able to access it. But just for the records, how much of UBEC's fund is still lying idle, and how many states so far have still not been able to access this fund?
Well, no, we publish these records. We do publish them on our website. And we every quarter, isn't it? We give out, isn't it? The level of access, that we have. As I said to you, the entire Northwest have accessed their money up to 2016. And as I said to you earlier, they cannot access, well, usually they don't want to access 2017. Why? Because the releases will not be complete until 31st of December, 2017. So they wait until the first quarter of 2018 to access, the remaining. Northeast, I've also mentioned to you that the entire zone also has had access up to 2016. That's, the current access that is there. With the exception of Adamawa, which had also pledged that it will soon come and pay the counterpart funding. And I mentioned to you again, the South-South, isn't it, all the 4 states, isn't it, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, coming, isn't it, there are only 2 states, isn't it, where you have Edo, which is in the process of reorganization, and he's saying that give us a little time, isn't it? We'll come and access the entire monies that we have, isn't it? 2015, 2016. Bayelsa also has access up to 2015, isn't it? And it's in the process of coming also because the governor, isn't he? I said he was also very keen.
What about states in the West?
I'm coming to that, isn't it? Unfortunately, the educationally advanced states are the ones that are not showing much interest in the access. In the Southwest, we have Lagos, which had always been at the top of the situation, isn't it, coming to access the funds, isn't it? Of course, Lagos has a much larger IGR than many others, but yet it takes education very seriously, isn't it, in that regard, isn't it, and feel that, isn't it has to do that. In fact, it's coming with its 2017 also, isn't it? Ondo recently, as I said to you, isn't it, also came and access from about 2014, 2015, 2016, isn't it, its entire sum. We have Ogun, we have Oyo that are lagging behind. And I think, we have been pressing, isn't it? Ekiti is also, isn't it, having some problems, isn't it, up to now. The entire southeast is only Imo, which is up to 2050. So I think, you can get the picture, isn't it, who is accessing and who is not accessing this fund, and it's something that I think we need to look at. But the most important thing is for us to appreciate the need for strategic, investment into this sector. And what do I mean by the strategic investment? Yeah, we can give funds. We can look at, but the entire fund that UBEC is giving how many schools can it build?
Dr. Baboye, you're talking about strategic intervention. As you are strategically intervening, you are also looking at the implementers. What has been your experience in terms of interaction with regard to the capacity at the local government level to get these things done, even though you don't, I mean, you interact with SUBEB? What is the feedback you get?
No, the feedback again is varied, isn't it? You know, you find there are those states that take education very seriously. Very seriously.
For example?
You have, you know, beginning with Borno, Kaduna, isn't it? You know, go to Kano, go to Bauchi, come back to the Southwest. They take education seriously, but I'm not sure. Even if you take Lagos, isn't it? You know, come and even take, isn't it? You know, states, you know, like Bayelsa, Cross River, Akwa Ibom. And so they are very, very serious, isn't it, about accessing, about utilization of this fund. Delta, isn't it? You know, and others. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there are some states that it takes time. I don't know what is the problem, and you know, we have begun to interact with them.
But then, you know, coincidentally, some of these states that you have mentioned, like Borno, you know, Kaduna, these are the states where you have the highest number of out-of-school children. Why? And these are the people who are able to access the fund.
Yeah. It's not in the utilization of the funds that is being given, but for us to go back and see the structure of the educational system from day one. Kano, there are more people in the Almajiri sector than there are in the public school system. Get back to Borno, there are more people, isn't, you know, in the Almajiri sector than there are in the public school, in the conventional school system. Go back to Bauchi, it's the same problem. So unless and until, because again, the point had been raised. This is not just an issue of cherry picking, isn't it? And see, there are fundamental problems with this system.
Namely?
Yeah. Now we come, if you look at the out-of-school children, what is the structure? You come to find that the Almajiri sector had been one of the dominant sectors that had not been properly addressed.
Yes,
you know,
but Dr. Sophie, Dr. Sophie said earlier that a few years ago, we were grappling with some 10 million out-of-school children. Now, the figure has climbed up, according to him, to 13 million.
Yeah.
So, what is it? The last administration tried to build up Nigerian schools. The Daily Trust reported yesterday, the lead story, that the schools have been abandoned. So,
the Almajiri schools, at that time, ETF, TED Fund, built about 36. UBEC, I think between 2011 and 2014, 2015, built about 165. And the report is correct in the sense that, yes, there are problems in the entire sector in handling the Almajiri issue. Why? Because we think that the way we solve the conventional school problems is the way that we also solve, isn't it, you know, the Almajiri problem, when it is not the case. We need to now go back to them, you know. These schools, the Almajiri schools, were built with boarding facilities at primary school level. How many states can afford to feed people at primary school level at the moment? You come to find that, isn't, you know, fortunately with the introduction, isn't it, of the federal government feeding program, at least some progress has been made in that particular regard. The junior girls that were also built by UBEC were also built with boarding facilities. The majority of the states, isn't it, you know, do not in any way, isn't it, you know, support boarding, isn't it, you know, for girls at the junior secondary school level. So you have this desynchronous policies that actually come, and that's the point that we have been raising. When I came to UBEC, I said, no, we need to be on the same level with the states. We need to understand and discuss with them and find ways in which whatever project that is put, it had been discussed thoroughly, isn't it, you know, and that kind that is accepted by all. What happened during that period was that the governors were called by the Vice President Namadi Sambo. They all came, isn't it, you know. Amechi was the chairman of the Governors Forum. He signed a memorandum on their behalf that we are going to do this, and isn't you are going to do this. All of them signed and left. I'm not sure whether that buy-in, that kind of discussion that is needed in building this system. And we cannot build this system without the synergy.
All right, Dr. Baboye, thank you very much. Dr. John Ovia will stay with us at our Benin Network Studios. We'll return to you. To one point, Dr. Baboye was just talking about what we need to do with a special area, namely dealing with the Almajiri population who remain out of the formal public school system. But from your understanding so far, what do we need to do with regard to local governments that would appear to be not up to scratch with the management of basic education? That's one. The second leg we can touch on briefly, is there a challenge with our curriculum for basic education? Are our children being prepared to be competitors in a new global environment?
In terms of your first question, I think, you know, like what we started doing in Edo State, looking at restructuring, you know, there has to be, at the various state level, some actions taken to, you know, look at the structure of the local education authorities and understand the capacity deficits there, and then put in place a process to strengthen, to build capacity, strengthen governance, structure at that level, and then also accountability. I think that's the part, that's the missing, to my mind, that's the missing link. We keep talking and talking, and like I said earlier, the rhetoric is very robust. We need people, we need the gatekeepers, the lowest level implementers of all of these policies to be really committed. If there is no passion, no matter the amount of funds that is thrown at basic education, we're not going to, the return on investment is going to be negligible at best. So passion has to be there, and if people don't naturally have the passion, we need to understand why. Do we need to incentivize some of these things, pay better, recruit higher quality personnel, and then put in place punitive measures that should also help to correct some of these lapses that we are seeing. So people have to be incentivized. They also have to be held accountable for what they do. So at the local education authority level, in terms of capacity and all of that, attention needs to be placed there to see what people are doing. There has to be a plan. In my state, our governor is all about what is the strategic plan that we are working off of. So we cannot just be all over the map, going helter-skelter. There has to be a method to the madness, if you will. In terms of the second question, I think could you repeat that? I've sort of lost my thought on that one.
It has to just do with the structure of the curriculum for basic education. Are our children being prepared at the basic education level to ultimately become competitors in a new global environment?
That's a great question. I don't think they are. I think the logistics of distributing the curriculum material is a problem. We are finding that even in some, you know, these materials, you know, they are being done and produced in Abuja, distributing them across the country. There seems to be a problem with that. I know when I did my PhD dissertation, you know, I found out that in some cases, when a new curriculum is being introduced, the previous ones is yet to actually get to the hinterland. We're talking about the hinterland of Nigeria, you know, other states that are not in the main grid. So distribution, the logistics of it, I think needs to be really improved by those who are in charge. When decisions are being made in Abuja, there has to be a way for it to trickle down to the states, to the rural areas. We are not having that right now. So if people don't have the materials that they need, the scheme of work, in our state is a constant conversation that we are having, monitoring and tracking. So how many do you need? How many do you have? What is the deficit? How can we quickly meet up those things? And then also, I think education is a sector that we really need to have very strong, be very disciplined about timetable. This sort of haphazard way of doing things where our children, our pupils are already in school, the materials they need have not, the instructional materials have not gotten to them. These are all part of the things that impact the quality of education that they are getting. So the commitment with curriculum, you know, getting materials to people is key. Getting the instructional materials, the textbooks to the children, to the pupils, it's very important.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Joy. We'll get back to you. But then, first of all, would like to takes most of our tweets that are actually coming in. This one is from Kabir Ibrahim. All these problems lie in the removal of basic education from the ETF, and because most of those at the helms of affairs have private schools.
Amorgan Paul tweets, dilapidated classrooms, low standard learning facilities, and poor payment of salaries. These are not healthy for our education. We should have crossed this era long ago. This is why parents send their children to private schools.
Henrietta Alomon tweets, how long will we continue to do the blame game? Not planning for one child affects every child in a question of time. Help the Nigerian child.
Rumer tweets, now, if there are schools, why don't parents allow their children to go to school, especially in the north? Education should be free and compulsory for every child.
Sunny Michael Omakadi tweets, there's no denying the fact that the state of our primary education is in comatose and near total collapse. But thank God for federal government's NPower program. Thus, federal government is encouraged to give permanent appointment to those involved. Well, the
last one we have from Festus Akimboyewa. It says that the most worrying is that it's the children of the poor that are affected by poor basic education in Nigeria, because the rich can pay any price for their children's education.
All right, those are the tweets that we can take right now, and it's on that note we want to thank all of our guests for joining us on this discussion this morning on the state of basic education in Nigeria. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Amid Boboye. He's Executive Secretary, Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And also, we'd like to thank Dr. Shetima Buka Kulima. He's a chairman, Borno State Universal Basic Education Board. It's a pleasure having you. And also a very big thank you to Dr. Sufi. Dr. Sufi is a former consultant, is a consultant on education and e-learning. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And finally, a very, very big thank you to the sole administrator, that's State Universal Education Board, Edo State, Dr. Joanne Osa Oviawe. We thank you so much for coming on the program. Thanks for your thoughts and time.
All right, that does it for our discussion segment. Let's move on now to our sports desk to take sports.
Do you remember table